listening to High School Sports Talk on ESPN Radio, presented by VirginiaPreps.com. Now back to your host, Matt Hatfield.
Thank you, Thomas. And we had a little bit of a miscommunication. We will get more of Draylon Ford, the Old Dominion football commit from Franklin High School, and his coach, Robbie Cutchins, in just a little bit. But we have the man, the college football guru. Get his book. It's the best in the business by far. It's, in my opinion, the college football Bible, top publication in the country. Our buddy Phil Steele on from Ohio. Phil, how's your summer going so far?
Real good. Matt, how about yours?
Doing well. Thank you for coming on the program, and we'll certainly get you on again some other time to go more in depth on some of these football teams. But let's start off how they can get your magazine and see your work.
Well, I appreciate that. The magazine hitting the newsstands officially June 26th, but it is out there in some places this weekend. So go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, CVS, Publix, Target, Walmart, Walgreens, places like that. And all I ask, open up a copy, compare it to every other college football magazine on the newsstand, and you'll see 3 to 4 times the amount of information. We give you the same amount of coverage on Old Dominion that we do on Alabama and Ohio State. 2 full pages, everything located in the same spot on every page.
Oh, that's news to all the ODU football fans out there here in Hampton Road. And there's a bunch of, as you know, Phil, for many years, fans of college football all over the country here in Virginia. You want to talk to Phil, give us a call at 757-687-9494, 757-687-9494 to ask about your team here on the program. And Phil, let me start off with, I'm going to guess, I haven't seen your magazine yet, and I'm looking forward to getting it. Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Ohio State as the consensus top 4. Is that right? And if not, who's someone outside that grouping, a team or 2 or 3 that could win it all?
Yeah, I have 3 of those 4 in my projected playoff, and so I'm going pretty much with the chalk this year. But the one outlier that I went with was the University of Washington. I think this is Chris Peterson's best team that he's put on the field since he's been at Washington, 17 returning starters. Remember 2 years ago, their quarterback Jake Browning threw for 43 touchdown passes. Last year that number dropped to 19. I think he regains his 2016 form. 9 starters back on the defensive side of the ball. This is a dangerous Washington team. If they beat Auburn in the opener, they would be favored in all the rest of their games this year. So I went with the Washington Huskies to make the playoffs.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, 2 years ago you were the only one that had them up there, and they ended up being in the top 4.
That's right. Last year I had my number 1 surprise team in the country. They weren't even ranked in the top 10 at the start of the season. And Washington ended up making the playoffs and playing Alabama. And this year's squad even better than that team.
Yeah, for sure. And looking at some of these teams that could be off the board, not getting a lot of fanfare in terms of top 25, Phil, give us someone that you can see really making some noise and maybe even thrusting themselves into the college football playoff conversation.
Well, we just talked about my number 1 surprise team from 2016, which is a non-top 10 team I think can make the playoffs. So let's go with my number 1 surprise team this year, and that's the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. When I look at Notre Dame, they have a tough schedule, but it's a manageable schedule with who they play and where they play them. Also, this year's Irish team has got 9 returning starters on defense. They have a number 13 rated defense in the country, number 16 rated offense. Brandon Wimbush back at the QB position, a veteran offensive line, despite losing 2 guys early to the NFL. And you look at their road games this year, they're against Wake Forest, Virginia Tech, Northwestern, and USC. They get the toughest games. I'm talking Michigan, Stanford, Florida State, all at home. I think the Irish have that potential to run the table this year, and that would make them a surprise contender for a playoff spot.
Oh, that would make my usual co-host, Coach Young, really, really happy. He is a diehard Notre Dame football fan. Is there a game on that schedule that you think is the trickiest for them?
Right out of the box, Michigan. Michigan is loaded this year. They go from being number 128 on my experience chart up to number 13. They go from 5 returning starters to 17, 1 returning starter on defense to 9. And the missing piece for Michigan the last couple of years has been quarterback. They had Shea Patterson from Ole Miss. Michigan is an early 1-point road favorite at Notre Dame in Vegas, but I still think the Irish can get that one and get themselves rolling to a big winning season.
We're talking with Phil Steele, the football guru himself. Go check out his work on the web, philsteele.com, for all the information. How you can get his publications, the college football preview, the football preview for the pros coming out soon, the FCS college preview. You don't want to miss it. Just great stuff for Phil Steele and philsteele.com. 757-687-9494 is the number that'll get you in here to talk to Phil. Give us a call at 757-687-9494 right here on ESPN Radio 94.1. And Phil, give us the three in-state FBS programs: Virginia Tech, UVA, and Old Dominion. Sort of a thumbnail on each, if you can, with some general thoughts on what should we expect.
Well, I'll start with Old Dominion, and it's good to see that they're finally back up there experience level-wise. You go back 3 years ago, they were a very lightly experienced team, and they struggled. They did not make a bowl game that year, although I thought they played well at 5-7. Then in 2016, they had an experienced team, one of the most experienced teams in the country, went 10-3, and had a huge year, including that Bahamas Bowl win over Eastern Michigan. Then last year, they dropped back down on the experience chart, way down, and they had a year where they didn't make a bowl. They were number 91 on my experience chart. Well, this year, back up again, number 16 on the experience chart, and I think that means ODU is headed back to a bowl game. In fact, they make my most improved list as number 6 most improved team in the country, and I think one of the most improved quarterbacks in the country is going to be Steven Williams at quarterback. He was thrown into the fire last year as a 17-year-old true frosh, but you look at his last 6 games, he hardly even turned the ball over. I think he's going to be a much better quarterback this year. Now, with Virginia, talking to Coach Mendenhall this year, I think they're in for a little bit of a rebuilding year. And a lot of folks say, hey, this team is young, and they talk about, we're 60% underclassmen. Well, of course you are. You have 3 classes that are underclassmen: true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, sophomores. Your juniors and seniors are the 2 classes that have the most attrition. But in Virginia's case, you look at their defense, that is an extremely young group. It's almost all underclassmen, very few juniors and seniors there. They lose a couple of key players in Andrew Brown, Micah Kaiser, Quinn Blanding, and I think the defense probably a year away from being really good. Offensively, they added in Bryce Perkins, but after making a bowl game last year, which was solid, you look at the schedule, you look at the inexperience level that Virginia has this year, and I think this could be a rebuilding year for the Cavaliers. And for Virginia Tech, and once again, you go back to defense, going over the defense with Coach Bud Foster, who I think is one of the best defense coordinators in the game. Very young defense, made even lighter by the fact that 2 guys that I had a cornerback in my magazine, Jeremy Webb and Adonis Alexander, are both now gone. They do get Joshua Jackson back on offense, but Bud Foster has his hands full, getting this defense up to his normal standards, which is a dominating year. And I still think they have the potential for a top 25 D, but the schedule's difficult. They play Florida State, Duke, North Carolina, and Pitt all on the road. They have some tough home games as well, but it should be a good year for VT.
Let's go to the phones for Phil Steele, the football forecaster extraordinaire. 757-687-9494. We'll get you in here. We talked to Kasim in Franklin. Kasim, you're on with Phil Steele.
Who's going to be the surprise team this year for 2018?
All right. Phil highlighted the surprise team earlier, but Phil, any others that we might not be highlighting just yet in terms of surprises at the top of your board? You got a couple others might be out there for surprises?
Yeah, I'll throw another one. I touched on Notre Dame's my number 1 surprise team. How about this one for number 2? Texas, 7-6 last year, and needed to win their bowl game to get to 7-6. When I talked to Coach Herman in the off season this year during the spring, he told me how disappointed he was in the offensive line and running backs last year. I know that's going to get corrected. They've got the talent there. Herman's made it an emphasis. They will have a better running game. Then you look at the quarterback play. They got Ehlinger and Buechele both back. The receiving core is solid, and the defense was second best in the Big 12 last year, has 7 returning starters. And when you look at the schedule, the road games are against Kansas, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, who's in a bit of a rebuilding mode this year, and Kansas State. Kansas State being the toughest one on the road. It's a Texas team that I've got tied for first in the Big 12. That makes them a legitimate title contender, despite the fact they're coming off a 7-6 season from last year. Appreciate the call, Kasim.
Back to the phones. Want to talk some Buckeyes? Well, Mike does in Norfolk. Mike, you're on with Phil Steele.
How you doing, Phil? I'm just curious, where do you see the Buckeyes finish this year? I know they have to replace 3/4 of the freshman package. I know they're going to have some guys stepping up on the D-line. So where do you see the Buckeyes this season coming up?
Yeah, they still have one of the top defensive lines in the country. That guy Nick Bosa is still back. Yeah, and so are a lot of his friends. So they have my number 2 rated defensive line. Offensively, I like Dwayne Haskins at QB. I think he'll be an upgrade passing-wise over what J.T. Barrett was and come close to what he was running-wise. They've got two super running backs in J.K. Dobbins and Mike Weber. The receiving core is solid. The offensive line looks good. And when you look at their schedule, they do have to play TCU in Arlington, Michigan State in East Lansing, and Penn State in Happy Valley. 3 pretty tough road games, but guess what? In Vegas right now, they're favored in all those games, and I concur. I have Ohio State favored in all the games. I think they win the Big Ten Conference this year and make it back to the playoffs. Appreciate the call, Mike.
You got a couple more minutes. If you want to hop in here with Phil Steele, give us a call at 757-687-9494. That's area code 757-687-9494 right here on ESPN Radio 94.1. Again, go to philsteele.com. Get his magazine. It's the best in the business, the College Football Bible. Phil, SEC, for years it's always been the strongest conference, it seems. Is that the case again, or do you see a conference that's on par with them this year?
Yeah, and in fact, Matt, the big question in my magazine every year shouldn't have been who's the toughest conference, but who's the second toughest conference. We know the SEC is number one. And that went on for about 10 years straight. But 2 years ago, I actually rated the ACC as the toughest conference. And this year, or last year, I should say, I had the Big Ten rated as the toughest conference. I mean, they had Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State, Wisconsin, and all 5 of those teams are legitimate national title contenders again this year. But the SEC is also loaded. So coming into this season, I've got them tied for number one. It's going to be really interesting to see who emerges. I think when you look at the SEC, Bama and Georgia both have a great shot at going 12-0, but they don't have quite the depth at the top that the Big Ten has, and it's going to be fun to watch. But to me, those are the top 2, with a close third being the ACC, which was my number one conference in college football 2 years ago.
As always, you can call in at 757-687-9494 to talk to Phil Steele, or hit us up on Twitter. HS Sports Talk 941. HS Sports Talk 941 is the Twitter page here for High School Sports Talk. And one of our listeners, Phil, has a question. Bob wants to know, what game is Phil looking forward to on the schedule the most this year? What game is the one that's kind of circling for you this year?
Well, there are so many great games out there. You know, I'll start with, let's go to that first week of the season, Notre Dame, Michigan. I think you have 2 legitimate national title contenders playing in the opening game of the season. That's going to be exciting, but Texas, Oklahoma is going to probably determine the Big 12. I'm looking forward to the SEC title game, which could be an undefeated Alabama against an undefeated Georgia. And then I'm looking at Clemson going into Florida State this year. Remember, Florida State gave them a good battle last year. Tons of good games in college football. The thing I love about it, in college football, every game is important. Every game is meaningful.
Well, and I think, too, Phil, it's even more so with the college football playoff. It's almost got a little bit of a college basketball March Madness feel to it. Not that the sport needed it, but I think it's amplified it even more.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the 4-team playoff makes it perfect. If you go to an 8 or 16-team playoff, then you have potentially Ohio State and Michigan playing the last game of the year and resting starters because they both know they're going to make the playoffs, and that's what's important is the playoffs. And I don't want to see that in college football. I want every game to be important, all the championship games of the conference being important, and that's what we have right now.
Our last call for Phil Steele today, we go out to Suffolk and we talk to David. He wants to talk Boise State. Phil, David, you're on with Phil Steele.
Yes, Phil. I wanted to see what you think about Boise State this year, how you think they would do.
You know, Boise State last year I felt was a little fortunate. They had an inexperienced team last year. They trailed Wyoming in the fourth quarter. Heck, they trailed Colorado State by 2 touchdowns with 2 minutes to go. And then they got the benefit of the Mountain West, still scratching my head over it, giving them the Mountain West home game for the title game last year, despite the fact they had just lost to Fresno on the road, straight up, head-to-head. But this year's Boise team's not going to need any of that good fortune. Talking about 10 returning starters on defense, 6 returning starters on offense. Defensively, they got my number 16 rated defensive line, number 37 set of DBs. Special teams solid at number 15. And a quarterback, how about Brett Rippon, the 4th-year starting QB, and he's got a lot of supporting talent. They get the toughest games at home this year. The biggest question mark on my schedule for them is at Oklahoma State week 3, but Oklahoma State looks to be in a bit of a rebuilding year, and if you're going to beat them early, and that's when they play them. Boise's my number 1 group of 5 team that I think has a chance of getting into that, New Year's Day 6 bowl bid.
And a lot of Redskins fans remember Uncle Mark Rippon leading the Redskins to a Super Bowl. Phil, our final question, we thank you so much for the time today, and we'll definitely get you on again, and we'll let you promote your magazine here in a second, too. But I want to know, without giving it away, one of the features I love in the magazine every year is the Heisman feature in the back. Give us sort of a couple of names to watch out for a Heisman Trophy this year.
Well, I think the two biggest names, number one, you have to go with Jonathan Taylor as a true freshman, almost had 2,000 yards. And he's running behind my number one rated offensive line in the country. He's going to have another big year. Secondly, Bryce Love. I mean, Love had over 2,000 yards despite playing the second half of the season basically on one leg. I mean, the guy was banged up in the entire second half of the year, yet still did well. He's running behind my number four rated offensive line. Then I'll throw a quarterback in there because, let's face it, quarterbacks win the award quite often. And I'm going to go with Trace McSorley at Penn State. When you look at Trace, he's a guy that's the straw that stirs the drink in the Penn State offense. And when you look at Penn State, their schedule this year, they take on exactly one team on the road that had a winning record last year. That's Michigan. I think McSorley could be the guy that gets them where they need to go.
Oh, you made our producer, Thomas, a big Penn State fan, a happy camper. Phil, one more time, tell the folks how they can check out all your work and get the magazine.
I appreciate that, Matt. Check it out. You go out this weekend, go to Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, CVS, Walmart, Walgreens, Target, Publix. Magazine should be hitting the shelves this weekend and by Tuesday, June 26th at the very latest. Open up a copy. You'll see 3 to 4 times the amount of information any other magazine out there. You can also go to my website, which is philsteele.com. That's STEELE.com. You can download it to your Android device, your iPhone, or your computer. And follow me on Twitter. It is at PhilSteele042. That's at PhilSteele042.
Oh, the magazine's the best, just jam-packed with information, simply the book the experts and any diehard college football fan cannot do without. Phil, thank you for making time for us this morning. We appreciate it and have a good summer. We'll talk to you soon.
Always enjoy the conversations, Matt. You have a great summer as well, my friend.
Take care. That is the one and only Phil Steele. Again, philsteele.com will get all your college football fix. He is the best in the business, prognosticating and forecasting. We've got Draylen Ford still here. Rob Cutchins, all you ODU football fans, let's hear from you. I know you're fired up. Monarch Nation, 757-687-9494 to